We finally made it. We finally made it to the end of our Intro to Movement series, and in this video I wanted to go through with you guys things that you should know before you train with me. So to preface this, I have been working my ass off for about 8 years now to really be kind of the best mover and teacher that I can be. And so I've traveled all around the world. I've learned from all the best teachers I can find. At this point, I do things very differently than a lot of other people. I teach all the best things I found in the best way I found so far, which means that if you've never trained with me before, there's a lot of catching up to do. I'm gonna try to fit everything we haven't covered yet in this last video. So bear with me, buckle up, and let's get started. The first thing is I'm not a fitness coach, I'm a movement teacher. And so while they may sound similar, they're very different. In the fitness world, coaches are just trying to build your physical fitness. So that means all your basic CrossFit stuff, endurance, muscle mass, strength, maybe hypertrophy, and losing fat. And that's all they care about. As a movement teacher, I look at the big picture. So the fitness world ends at your physical capacities and what you look like. But as a movement teacher, there's so much that leaves out. We try to work on everything. Movement extends so far beyond your physical capacities. We go into things like creativity, play, expression, coordination, balance, and so much more. How do you learn new skills? How do you deal with challenging movements? What can you do with your body other than endless repetitions of fitness movements? The next thing for students who are new to movement is that this is a long game. There's an infinite number of movements that we can work on, and we can't perfect any of them. So while the norm these days is to specialize in a very specific field and get very good at very few things, we look at a much bigger picture. It's never too late to start, and you're not going to be finished until you're dead. There are coaches and athletes who spend their entire lives obsessively researching just one movement discipline, one sport. We have to study all of them, so it becomes much more of a Sisyphean endeavor. You're never going to be ready, you're never going to be perfect, but all we look for is improvement. Improvement is everything. In movement, that is so much easier than trying to improve at one specific thing your whole life. I draw from a lot of disciplines. As movement teachers, every sport is a discipline we can study and obsess over again for a lifetime. Just to list a few of those disciplines, we have hand balancing, capoeira, dance, Olympic lifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding, physical therapy, BJJ, wrestling, judo, contact improv, parkour, juggling, gymnastics, motor learning, and pain science. But again, this is just a list of what I tend to pull from, and there will be more in the future, and it's certainly not limited to just those. Movement isn't something you can master in a lifetime, let alone a decade, a year, or a few weeks. So if you train with me, I expect you to make this a serious commitment. This is why I stopped offering drop-ins years ago. Next is the importance of bare feet. So there's a guy, Andrea Spina, who created FRC, and he said something really pertinent here. Imagine the effect it would have on your hands if we wore gloves all the time. Then imagine if those gloves kept all your fingers glued together. Your hands would be so much less dexterous, coordinated, mobile. They would just kind of become clubs. We wouldn't be able to do interesting and useful things with our hands. And so this is what happens to our feet. We have hundreds of thousands of nerve endings in our foot. They are there for a good reason, and that reason is to feel the floor. There's a reason we have toes and not just a big club for a foot. And if you're wearing shoes all the time, you are losing that sensitivity and connection to your foot. In addition, if your shoes have a heel lift, which most do, then your Achilles tendon is going to start to shorten and tighten up, and that's going to lead to all sorts of other problems for you. So when I teach, we do pretty much everything barefoot because I want you guys to get that connection to your feet and your toes and the floor. So in most fitness settings, people take a bodybuilder approach. So they'll say, okay, I want this muscle to be bigger. What does this muscle do? Elbow flexion. So I'm gonna work on elbow flexion. And so they do this for the whole body. Ito made a great point about this, that this is reverse engineering. So this is trying to create a body that looks functional just by trying to create the look. What we do is we focus on the function, and the look comes after. The look isn't as important. Do you want to look like you can move, or do you want to be able to move? The two are different things. If you want to see an example of how dramatic this difference is, you can look up any video of a bodybuilder fighting a professional fighter. It is incredible. In the first UFC, a lot of the guys were really big and muscular, and what we found out very quickly was that most of those guys, they'd been spending all their time in the gym just working on lifting weights and building muscle, hadn't spent a lot of time on actually learning how to fight, and so they weren't very good at it, and they lost pretty quickly. And so nowadays, when you look at the top fighters in the world, yeah, some of them look like they're in shape, but a lot of them look like Nate Diaz and BJ Penn. These guys, if you saw them with their shirt on, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that they worked out at all. But if you challenge them to a fight, good luck. Anyway, by working on the actual function of your body rather than trying to focus on how it looks, I think it's a much healthier, more interesting, and positive way to train and relate to your body. Just like you are so much more than what you look like, So is your body. There's a tendency in almost every sport to think that certain movements are correct and certain movements are wrong. And especially that the coaches are the only ones that know the correct movements. I heavily disagree with this. I think it's very powerful knowledge to have that this is total BS. There's nothing preventing you from having a more effective movement solution than your coach. There's nothing about any coach that makes their solutions to a problem mystical or perfect. There are mistakes with everything. No movement is perfect. So I like to think of this like chess. There are better and worse moves. And it's certainly easier to recognize the bad moves than the good ones. But there's also not really any perfect moves, which means that we can always improve something. In addition, there's going to be more than one solution to almost any problem. So while in class I may show something a particular way, you may find a slightly different version that works better for you. And that's what it's all about. Remember, everyone has different muscle fiber composition, muscle insertions, flexibility, general attributes, and proportions. So these are things that are all going to affect your technique. So even if I hypothetically had the perfect technique for my body, it's going to be different from the perfect technique for your body. Even if they're very similar, some of these small modifications can make a big difference for you. So always be looking for those optimizations when we're learning skills. To me, it's not about right or wrong. It's all about optimizations and making things better. Homework is really important. So in my class, we have about 7 hours a week that we can work on everything. And so that's your flexibility, that's your strength, that's your coordination, that's your dance. It's so many things. We could have 7 hours a day, it still wouldn't be enough. So 7 hours a week is far, far less. And we do the best with what we've got. But that's a starting point. And so I want you guys to know, we're gonna work you towards a general improvement in all these areas. But if there's challenging skills that you want to achieve, you're gonna have to work on them outside of class as well. Repetition is the mother of all skill. And I didn't get my one-arm handstand by hanging out with Ito. Next, we got a big one, the optimal theory. So this is a huge leap forward in motor learning. Before, the model for motor learning was entirely based on information processing. Essentially, there's a feedback loop for perception-action coupling. And so you perceive something in your environment, and then you couple an action with that. You try to change your environment, and then you perceive the change, you compare it to what you expected the change to be, and you make another action. And so as we get more skilled, we get better and better at this perception action coupling, not just faster, but also coupling better, more effective actions with our perceptions. Optimal theory addressed a huge gap in that model. So the optimal and optimal theory stands for optimizing performance through intrinsic motivation and attention for learning. And before, those attentional factors were completely ignored. So a lot of this is intuitive at the beginning, but as we get deeper into it, it might be very counterintuitive for you guys, and it certainly was for me. But this is heavily based on research. This is not a theory that they've just concocted out of nowhere. This is based on decades of research. So I highly recommend you guys read this paper. It's enormous. It's a huge undertaking. It took me a week to really work my way through it, but it is engaging. It is written in a way where even the general population can read and understand it, and it is so valuable and useful. So basically their theory comes down to this: the more focus we have on the task goal, the better. If you're focused on the task goal, you're gonna perform better and you're gonna learn faster. There are three main things that are gonna feed into this focus on task goal. The motivational factors are autonomy and expectancies, and the attentional factors are internal or external focus. Each of these can increase or decrease focus on task goal, which will lead to a positive or negative feedback loop respectively. So expectancies are basically how well you think you'll perform on a task. Autonomy is sort of how much control you feel over your actions. And internal focus is a focus on body movements or body positioning. And external focus is a focus on the intended effect of the movement. So for example, if we're doing a push-up and I give you an internal focus cue, which is what most coaches usually do, and I tell you to tuck your elbows in on the push-up. Now you're thinking about your elbows, tucking them in. So you're not thinking about the task goal, which is pushing yourself up. So hence your performance in pretty much every way is gonna be lower. You're gonna have less force production, it's gonna be less efficient, you're gonna have less endurance, less speed, less power. Everything you can think of will be worse, basically. And then now that you've done worse on the task, it's gonna feed back into your expectancy. So you've done worse on your task, your expectancies are going to be lower. That's going to negatively affect your focus on task goal, which is then going to further reduce your performance in learning. And it's going to continue feeding back over and over. And this is what they call a vicious cycle. On the flip side, if I give you an external focus, so if I tell you focus on pushing into the floor, you're now focused on the task goal. So you're going to produce more force. It's going to be more efficient. There's going to be more degrees of freedom with your movement. It's going to be smoother. It's going to be more accurate. Everything about it is going to be better. And now that's going to feed back back into your expectancy. So now you did really well. You're going to expect that you're going to perform even better on the next one. That feeds back into more focus on the task goal, which is then going to have a more positive effect on your performance and learning. And so this is now called the virtuous cycle. And so in their theory published in 2016, they laid out all the evidence to support these three factors having a positive effect on performance and learning through focus on task goal. So external attentional focus cues on the intended effect of the movement are going to have a beneficial effect, and internal focus cues are going to have a negative effect. Enhanced expectancies are going to have a positive effect. So for instance, there was one study where they told everyone, people like you tend to do really well on this test. And guess what? They did better. They told it to everyone. It wasn't really a real thing, but everyone did better with it because they had enhanced expectancies. They were more confident. So they had more focus on the task goal. They had better performance and learning, and then again, virtuous cycle. So they all did better if they were told that they were better at the task. The third thing was the autonomy. So when coaches give instructions, we can categorize that as controlling language or autonomy supportive language. So if we're doing that push-up and I tell you this is the way you've got to do it, it has to be exactly like this, that limits your options. It limits your autonomy. And so that's going to have a negative effect on focus on task goal. Maybe because you're too busy trying to remember everything I said exactly, that you're not actually focusing on the task. So people are going to do worse. And then they'll run into that negative feedback loop vicious cycle. Versus if we have autonomy supportive language, if I tell you these things tend to help and they might help you, now you have guidance, but you don't have limitations. You're not constrained to having to do things in a certain way. And so it's going to increase your focus on task goal. That's going to again increase your performance and learning. And then positive feedback loop, virtuous cycle, we're killing it. And that's optimal theory in a nutshell. I highly recommend you guys actually read the whole paper. A few months ago when I finished this paper, I actually took an entire class and went through with my students optimal theory, and we talked all about it. We did very little actual training that day, and we just discussed optimal theory. It's had such a positive effect, not just on my teaching, but also on their learning and understanding. How we not just think about learning these different things, but also communicate and teach other people. Remember, learning and teaching are a fundamental part of our everyday lives. So why do we do stillness in my movement classes? A lot of people would say that it's a movement class, so let's just do movement and let's just train, right? The problem with that is, if we were to make a Cartesian separation between the mind and body, which doesn't exist, movement would be for training the body, but stillness is for training the mind. There's so much that comes out of movement, but at the same time, there's so much that comes out of stillness. There's so many things and different ways that you can improve through movement, but there are also things that movement may not improve. So I had a jiu-jitsu instructor that gave the example one day that jiu-jitsu would teach you patience. If you're in a fight with your spouse, you want to yell at them or whatever, that jiu-jitsu would teach you patience. And I thought it was so funny because this guy is so good at jiu-jitsu and has no patience. So, it's a common thing. Like, sure, jiu-jitsu can help some people build patience, maybe. Yeah, and movement can too, for sure. But stillness is where we really focus on and build that capacity, that internal somatic side of things that you may or may not get with movement. So movement training will make you a better mover, but stillness will make you a better person. And so both sides are very, very important. We can't ignore either, and so we work on both. And again, my main movement teacher, Ido Portal, he changed and evolved so much as a person over the years that I've known him. I remember when I saw him at movement camp in 2019, I was sort of thinking to myself, I was like, wow, this is a totally different person. Like Ido had grown a lot. And sure enough, he said he had been doing a lot of stillness and a lot of meditation, and 2 hours a day. And it showed, it showed in just how he was approaching everything. So why do we do handstands? Why do I have so much emphasis on handstands and hand balancing and inversions in my classes? Isn't that a specialization that we're going to specialize in handstands? And shouldn't we think, a lot more wider? Here's the thing is, I think as far as one movement or one movement sleeve, inversions and handstands and hand balancing is so potent for both teaching you movement principles and for changing your perspective. You know, a lot of us, maybe it's been a long time since some of you have been upside down, you know, in any way or form. And so just doing that is one thing, but then to be able to invert yourself and go upside down at will, and then to balance yourself over your hands, especially to do it when and how you want in all sorts of different variations, that's a totally different thing. That's a game changer for people. It gives you so many different options and wonderful affordances. That's a really, really nice thing, and it's worth all the emphasis we place on it. And while jiu-jitsu may not teach you patience, a good handstand practice will certainly help. Here's another one. Start by copying my movements, but remember, my perfect movement is going to be different from your perfect movement, right? The perfect movement doesn't exist, but it's an optimization we can go towards, right? We can continue tinkering and refining things. And there are a lot of individual differences between how I do something, how you do something, how someone else will do something. We're all human and we have very similar bodies in a lot of ways. We also have a lot of differences. So we can use those similarities to start, and you can copy what I do at the beginning. But as you start refining something, I always want you guys to tinker with things and find a way that is best suited to you. Now here's a very interesting exception. So I think in almost everything in life, chasing the looks of something is vain, it's misleading, it's shallow, and it's something I really dislike, distrust, disgusted, perhaps. It's something that I try to stay far away from. But in dance and movement, a lot of these things, so it's almost like your subconscious mind can make a very quick assessment of how good a movement is, and that assessment plays an enormous role in how good it looks. And so in dance in particular, and many different movement disciplines, we actually want to pay a good amount of attention to how nice something looks, and maybe even focus on how it looks and chasing those aesthetics. Because actually in dance, chasing the aesthetics doesn't just lead to a surface level proficiency. It actually leads to a much deeper level, a core foundational level of proficiency that we don't see in other things when you chase looks. So think about the lens that optimal theory would lend to this idea of chasing aesthetics. For a lot of movements, we'll have a task goal, right? If I'm fighting someone, maybe the goal is to knock them out, right? Or if you're Floyd Mayweather, maybe you just want to win by points. But the task goal is, I want to win by knockout. We're playing volleyball, the goal is to score a point. Tennis, score a point. Soccer, score a point. But there are a lot of these things where the task goal is not clear. What is the task goal for dance? Right? It's no simple, easy thing like score the point, get the takedown, get the submission. It's much more abstract. And so in these areas of movement where we don't have a clear and definable task goal, especially because it's a much more creative task, then the focus goes more towards the aesthetics. And so as you chase the aesthetics, your proficiency will improve. Our brains have very good assessment of how much control we can demonstrate and how hard different movements are. For instance, if I was in a downward dog, maybe it's not getting a big stretch anywhere, and I'm just balancing on both hands and both feet. And now I take one foot off the floor. This is a little more interesting, say. Well, now let's bring the other leg off the floor. Now you're in a handstand. If you're looking at this, well, it looks kind of interesting, right? It starts to look actually nice. And now take the other hand off the floor. Now you're in a one-arm handstand. This thing is all of a sudden one of the most beautiful movements and positions. Our eyes can see, like, there's some level of assessment of the difficulty that lends itself to the aesthetics. So if we chase the aesthetics, the difficulty is under it. You can't just look like a better dancer without being a better dancer. To look like a better dancer, you have to become a better dancer. And so looking like a better dancer is a much easier to assess metric. So that's what we use. Now, Nassim Taleb has a wonderful concept. A chef doesn't have to know the molecular composition of a soup in order to cook it. As we have more and more information available, the temptation on so many of these things is to start analyzing the molecules of the soup and to do things based on that. But chemistry and cooking are two different things. You take the 10 best chemists in the world, put them in a cooking competition, they're not gonna do very well, right? Understanding some chemistry concepts could be very helpful for cooking. But there's a difference between using those bigger, wider concepts and analyzing micro details. And those details is where you start to get in a lot of trouble. It's where you start to get things wrong. So instead of focusing on the molecules of the soup, focus on cooking it. Don't think about where your muscle insertions are. Don't think about getting tested for your muscle fiber composition. Focus on the things that are gonna help. Focus on those big concepts, the principles, the things we've gone over in this series, and focus on doing a better job of using them. For example, when I first got my personal training certification from National Academy of Sports Medicine in 2013, their whole model was based around posture. And so the idea was that people have these postural imbalances, upper cross and lower cross, basically kind of hunching forward or posterior pelvic tilt or an anterior pelvic tilt. And the idea was that these postural imbalances were because some muscles are too weak and too loose, and some muscles are too tight and overworked. And so we need to stretch and foam roll the muscles that are hypertonic and too tight and too strong. And we need to strengthen the muscles that are too weak and too loose. When I started actually working with clients, what I realized very quickly was all of the muscles are too weak and all of the muscles are too tight. It's not like some muscles were too strong and some muscles were too flexible. And then what I later realized was that foam rolling, which was one of the big modalities that they were pushing, basically doesn't do anything. The effects only last for 15 minutes. And the whole idea that upper cross and lower cross were causing pain is totally without basis. And so the thing was, like, this was a focus on the molecules of the soup. Instead of focusing on the actual pain people are feeling and their function, the focus was on these mechanisms that we assume would have an effect on the function, but they didn't. And we were also going to use a modality that we assumed would have an effect on the function but didn't. And so this is what Nassim meant when he said that a chef doesn't have to know the molecular composition of a soup in order to cook it. It's when you try to go too deep, we start really getting some big picture things wrong. And so if instead we focus on that big picture, what does the soup taste like? Let's make it better. What are the concepts that really underlie what makes a soup good, and working with those? What are the concepts that really make us strong and flexible and mobile and coordinate and get us out of pain? That's a whole different way to look at things than trying to assume that we understand the cause and effect and then working with different things and focusing on different things. Instead of getting bogged down in the details of the molecular composition of the soup, just think about, what is that whole soup? What does it taste like? How do you feel? Does it hurt? Do you feel strong? Are you increasing your strength? Are you getting better? Or are you not? Here's another one that maybe a lot of people won't like. I believe in sometimes throwing you in the water to teach you how to swim. And so here's the thing. You can never be fully prepared for something you haven't done. For instance, if we were teaching you how to swim, we could spend 5 months on the land showing you all the different stroke mechanics, and maybe we'll work on your overhead shoulder mobility and all this and that and the other thing, and all these things that we think are gonna be helpful for teaching you how to swim. But if you never get in the water, you've never actually tried swimming, we're not gonna be very effective. So in that same scenario, if we just take you, instead of just spending months and months and months preparing you to get in the water, if we just throw you in the water sometimes, you'll figure out a lot. And you might figure out more in those first 10 minutes of just being in the water than in months of trying to teach you how to swim without being in the water. Of course, we have to take certain precautions. We gotta make sure you're not gonna drown when we throw you in the pool. Maybe we throw you in the shallow side, but there are ways we can get you in the water quickly and safely. And while it might feel overwhelming, if we spend 5 months teaching you how to swim and we do a good job, when we eventually do put you in the water, you're gonna feel pretty confident, you're gonna have a good idea of all the things what to do, but you're gonna be terrible. So you haven't tried it, really. Versus if we throw you in, you're gonna feel a lot less confident. You don't know what's going on, but you're gonna learn faster. You're gonna improve way, way faster. It depends on the scenario, it depends on the person, but a lot of times, I will throw you guys in the water because it will be better for you. And if you can stick with it, if you can just not get frustrated, if you stay in that growth mindset, you're gonna be good. You're gonna improve and grow so much faster. Chapter 22, you don't get good at things you don't practice well. Pretty much all of us drive all the time. Some of us hours a day, others maybe 20, 30 minutes, who knows? But we all drive a lot. But how many people are good at driving. If I take a random person that drives all the time, and now I put you in a competitive race, a competitive test of your driving abilities. Even if we say it's specific, who's gonna drive to work in the safest and most efficient way and do the best job of parking? Most people are gonna be really bad, because while they've been doing the thing, they've been practicing, they have the volume, there was no intensity to it. There was no challenge on that volume. When we drive, we're not thinking about driving, we're just doing it. We're going through the motions, A to B. And so when we do and learn movements, it's very similar. Are you just gonna be there and be present and go through the motions? Or are you really gonna focus, really gonna challenge yourself, try to improve, look for areas where you're making mistakes and try to fix them? It's gonna be totally different things. Along the same line of thought is our next concept. Bring a notebook and take notes. This is so helpful. Just by taking notes, even if you don't even look at them, you don't even review your notes, just the act of writing things down is gonna make your retention so much higher. And when we're playing the long game, retention essentially is learning. It doesn't matter what you learn if you forget it. So how much you really learn is how much you actually retain. And how much you actually retain is gonna be much higher if you actually take notes. So for all my classes, it's a requirement. Get a notebook, take notes. I picked up the next concept from Rasmus Olme at Movement Camp in 2019. And so this one is everything, everywhere, all the time. At first he said this and I was like, oh, this is kind of lame. But the more we practiced it, basically on pretty much any movement, if you're doing a good job, everything will be moving. Everything moving. Everywhere, all the time. The movement starts synchronized and finish synchronized. So while it's hard to define what a bad movement is, it's a lot easier to define a worse movement. Things that are jerky is 1, 2, 3, 4 versus things that are smooth, things that all the joints exhibit this synchronicity. These are gonna be the better movements. They're gonna be more efficient, they're gonna look more pretty, and as you develop more and more skill, you'll go closer towards this concept. Everything, everywhere, all the time. And so this is a really nice one because it's very general and almost universal. Even if you're trying a movement, you've never seen it performed well before, maybe you have no idea what good for that movement looks like, this concept still applies. Everything, everywhere, all the time. And so if there are certain joints that are involved in this movement, you don't have to use extra joints, but all of the joints that are involved should be synchronized and working together cohesively. It shouldn't be elbow flexion, shoulder flexion, abduction. It's all three. All three work together. Here's something else that a lot of people aren't doing that they're really missing out on. Asking questions. So a lot of people, I think the temptation is you keep your mouth shut, you could seem smart. You don't know something, you don't say anything, maybe people will assume you know it. Or asking that question could be embarrassing. It could be something very simple that you feel you should know, and you don't want to draw attention to the fact that you don't know it. But you will never learn if you don't ask. It will remain a gap for you in your knowledge. And so this is something I picked up from my professor at Stanford. He was a huge mentor for me. He would always ask questions, and he was so big on this. I mean, he's one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met. I guarantee so much of it was because he would ask questions all the time. And because he would ask questions all the time, they became very good questions. And so this is something I've picked up from him, and I've continued ever since. I always ask questions. If I don't know, I don't care what you think, I'm gonna ask. I don't care how stupid I'm gonna look, I'm gonna ask. I have a friend that's training on a professional jiu-jitsu team. And so he's taking a class with a head instructor who's very strict, and he doesn't really know the move they're working on, but his partner is even worse. And so he decides that rather than try to teach his partner and have his mistakes called out, that he just didn't say anything. And he let his partner just keep making these mistakes. And sure enough, the instructor comes over and just crucifies the guy. And my friend, he's just, I sort of knew this was gonna happen. He was bad, but he asked my friend, did you know how to do this? And he goes, yes. He says, okay, good. And he moves on. And it's a rough situation. It's easy to, I understand the pressure that can come with situations like that. But the reality is, if you want to actually improve, you can't have situations like that. You can't let opportunities to improve just go by to preserve your ego. Ask the question, even if you're gonna look stupid, and you're gonna get smarter. And oftentimes the question will sound silly, but it's actually really good. And just by asking a question, not only can you learn something, but often the instructor can too. So I always ask questions. And if you ever take a class where I'm also a student, you'll notice I'm right up there in the front. Sometimes I'll ask more questions than everyone else combined. But guess what? I also learn more. So it's a much more effective way to spend your time. If something is worth your time to be there, your time, energy, and money to go and do something. Why not get the most out of it? And you've got to ask questions to do that. You just have to. And the last thing for this video is pain science and injuries. So if you guys haven't watched my pain science video, you can go check that out. But right now, I want you guys to realize that injuries and pain are a big part of movement and life. We get injuries without movement, we get injuries with movement. One of the most important things that I aim to teach all of my students is just the ability to communicate with your body of what it needs. This thing hurts, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna do less of certain things? Are you gonna do more of certain things? Which things are you gonna do? What intensity are you gonna do them at? Learning how to navigate pain and work with those injuries, recover them, work around them, is a huge, huge part of movement practice that when you first come into it, you likely have not developed at all. In the general population, when people have an injury, it's just rest for 4 weeks. You know, it works sometimes, but it often doesn't. And what we do know is it's the easiest and fastest way to get out of shit. Learn to work with pain. It's a signal. It's a useful signal from your body, and you can't just ignore it and work through it. And you also can't overreact and just stop everything. Okay, so we can't have an intro to movement series without learning any movements. We're gonna learn the rotational fishermen today. Arguably my favorite move. There is a lot of value to it. There's a lot of use to it. There's a lot of variations of it. It can be beautiful and really, really gorgeous, but it's also very simple and easy to learn. I think it's a perfect move to learn as a beginner. Movement and dance are different things, and dance is a subset within movement, but as far as one move to learn to start with, this is a really great one for you guys. We're gonna build this up step by step. We're gonna start really easy. It's a simple move. There's still a lot of parts to it. And I really like some of these moves that are kind of simple and basic, but have levels of refinement to them. So like a great example would be a pirouette in ballet, where everyone starts, you know, sort of a day one thing. You're gonna learn a pirouette. How many people can do it really, really well? There's so few. And when you do see that pirouette done that well, it is just incredible, you know. Fisherman is just like that. It's gonna be easy to do it, relatively easy to do it, but it's gonna be very hard and gonna take a lot of time and practice to get it to that level where it's gonna be really, you know, fantastic. The first thing we're gonna learn is what I call cycling the legs. This is another thing that comes up in a lot of different movements. It comes up in jiu-jitsu. Let's say I'm in side control. If I have to do like a knee escape and come up on a single leg, you have to cycle the legs to be able to turn over and come up. And in dance and in movement, it's so many of these rolls, you have to cycle your legs like this. So a really great thing to learn, and it's a big component of the fisherman. So what we'll do is we'll start with our legs just like this. So one leg is on top, one leg is on bottom. And we've got one hand on the floor. So my right leg's in front, my left hand, contralateral hand is in the back. So from here, we're gonna place the other hand and switch here. So from one hand to two hands, one hand. And notice, my feet aren't leaving the floor, they're just sliding along the floor. Also important, I've only got one butt cheek on the floor. I want to be here, one hip. It's gonna be much easier. So I could do it with just a little bit of rotation or no rotation, or I could do a lot of rotation. Once we've got that, we're gonna come up to what we call the low fisherman. So from here, this shin is perpendicular, and I'm just gonna slide forward over it. And this hip is very low, so the hip is sitting on the heel here. I come up to the low fisherman, I come back down, and now I plant the other hand, do my leg cycling, and come over here. And hip comes to the floor softly. This is very important. Get your hip to the floor as softly as you can. You can use the hand to do that. Low fisherman, come down, plant the hand, cycle the legs, come through. Now from there, all we're gonna do is we're gonna come up. So, we're gonna go low fisherman, and then we're gonna come high fisherman here. The hip comes off the butt. And also notice, there's gonna be a little bit of rotation of the shin here. Come back down, place the hand, get the hip down as softly as possible, place the other hand, cycle the legs, come up low fisherman, come up high fisherman. Now, One last thing, from the high fisherman, we're gonna stand up. So the mistake here is a lot of people from here, they'll try to just stand straight up. This is awkward, right? I have to get my center of mass over that foot, then I could stand up. So what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna continue our weight forward. Come up, high fisherman, up and forward, reverse it back, place the foot softly, knee softly, hip softly. Both hands, cycle the legs, low fisherman, high fisherman, up and forward. There's kind of just one more step we need to add, and that is that entrance. There are many, many, many variations of the fisherman, which is another reason why it's such a nice move to learn, especially as a beginner. So we're learning the rotational fisherman today. So I'm gonna step the same side. I've got my right shoulder forward, I've got my right leg forward. Stepping same side, I'm gonna throw this front arm, just like I'm throwing a frisbee. And you guys are gonna hear that little bit, that noise of sort of cutting through the air with your hand. That's something we want to go for. That rotational momentum will pull you into the rest of the move. As I'm rotating through, I'm going to place my hand so it faces towards the direction I was coming from. And this back leg is going to swing around like a tail. So it might leave the floor a little. When it does touch the floor, it might also slide across the floor, but it's going to slide very lightly. It's going to slide, not drag. I don't want to be doing it like this. That's not going to be fun. And you're not going to be able to do very many before you destroy the top of your feet. So, roll, rotate. The shin and knee will come down a little early here, and then as I start to bring the hip down, the shin will continue to rotate until it essentially points the direction I'm traveling towards. So you see how this foot is pointing towards you guys. Throw, fisherman. So from here, I just landed here, right? Guess where we are, it's the same position. So I'm gonna place the other hand, cycle the legs, right? So right now my right leg's on top. I'm gonna keep both feet on the floor and cycle so the left foot is on top. From here, I'm gonna try to get it so this shin is perpendicular to the direction I wanna go in. So from here, I would wanna go in this direction. And from there, we're gonna come out the same way. So we're gonna go low fisherman, high fisherman, stand up and forward. So again, throw the arm, place the hand. Slide the leg, the knee comes down soft, hip comes down soft, place the other hand, cycle the legs, boom, we're here, come through low fisherman, high fisherman, up and forward. So if you're paying attention, at this point, you're probably thinking, Bren, what the hell are you doing? You just gave me a bunch of internal focus cues and controlling language instructions. And you're exactly right. So those are all guidelines for how I do it that will help you. They will probably help you. You might want to change and tinker with a few things, but I also want to give you the task goal. And so anything that brings you closer to the task goal is going to be helpful. So remember, this is a close skill. So it's not like you're fighting someone else and the goal is just to like knock the guy out however you can. Some of the goal of how we do this is kind of to do it a certain way. So for instance, if I tell you the task goal is to enter the floor smoothly, you might decide that a totally different move is a better way for you to do that. And the problem with that is then you don't learn this move. So I want you guys to, within the archetype of this move, within the idea of the rotational fisherman, that's where I want you guys to tinker with things. So keep it so it has the spirit of this move, but as far as certain details of how much rotation you place the hand with, does the foot leave the floor or slide across the floor? Those are the things I want you guys to tinker with. And again, find the things suited towards the task goal that will help you with the task goal. The task goal is we are entering and exiting the floor as smoothly as possible with a rotation. Anything that helps you enter the floor here, so this hip doesn't slam down, so this knee doesn't slam down, so this foot doesn't, nothing slams into the floor, and so the movement isn't jerky. You know, we don't want to do like entering the floor and exiting the floor smoothly with a nice rotation, a continuation of momentum. That's what we want to do here. So for your external focus cues, now that you understand the optimal theory, you can tinker with different attentional focus that you feel will help you towards those task goals. One really good one might be focusing on how much impulse is coming into the floor and how much you're slamming down into the floor or smoothly entering. Another one might be just a continuation of the momentum, how nice that feels to you. There's all sorts of different attentional focus cues that you guys can use, and you shouldn't feel just limited to the ones that I come up with. So with this, find ones that work for you and let me know what you found. If you want to learn more about movement, click here or here.